Hi everyone, it's Kate from The Fold Line. I am back with the Sewdown. Now apologies, it has been absolutely ages since we've done one of these. We thought as it's the Easter weekend, nice long weekend, most people have got a bit of time off. This is the perfect opportunity to share some nice things that we've read and listened to and watched to keep you company, hopefully while you're doing a bit of sewing over the Easter weekend, in amongst, obviously guzzling chocolate. So I'm going to start with, I've got a couple of books, I've got some articles, things to watch, and some really nice podcasts for you all. So I'm going to get started. The first one is an audio book that I'm listening to. You can obviously buy the book as well. It's Dolly Parton, Behind the Seams, My Life in Rhinestones. And I'm really enjoying it, particularly because it's actually narrated by her, which is great. But she's talking about her life in clothing. She shares lots of stuff about her costumes, the people who make her costumes for her. She's sort of talking about it as a sort of self kind of help book to give you the confidence to wear what you want. I'm probably like a third of the way in, but the bit I'm listening to at the moment is more her talking about like her sense of style, which I found quite interesting because she's obviously got quite an iconic style, and I've always been a bit of a Dolly Parton fan. So it's quite like nice light listening, and obviously you can buy the book of this too, but yeah, it's out there and I'm really enjoying it. It's something that I'm not listening to continuously, I'm sort of dipping in and out of, but yeah, it's a very fun listen, and especially with her doing the narration. So next up, we have got a great book from Tilly and the Buttons. I'm sure many of you have seen this already. It's out next month, and it's called Mini Makes, and it's a pattern book for children, so children ages 0 to 12. Now, I went to the Stitch Festival last week, and she had one of the copies on her stand. And so I had a really good look through it, and there are really lovely projects inside. I was really impressed. They're really, as you would imagine with the sort of Tilly and the Buttons brand, like really colourful, really fun designs, basically stuff that your kids are going to absolutely love. I'm sort of thinking these might be nice if you've got children who are creative and like making. It could be a really nice thing to get and do a project with them. They're really good. So it's out on the 25th of April, so we've got kind of a month to go. But if you pre-order them, then it just comes through your letterbox on the publication date, I think. But yeah, it's really fun, and I think it will be a really nice one. So if you do like making kids' clothes, it's definitely worth looking at. And in that vein, now it's quickly, and then I feel like I've gone into a kids department, and then I will move back out. If you do have children who like sewing and are interested in craft, someone sent us an email about a CBBC programme which is quite fun. It's called Style It Out, and the premise is almost a little bit like Sewing Bee but with children. And they are making clothes. They're given a brief and they are making outfits out of recycled clothes. I think there's about 6 or 7 episodes, but it's quite fun. And I was just thinking, anyone who's got someone who likes to make stuff, actually, or any kids, it's a really nice one. So each episode is, there is, let me see, 4, 8, there's 10 episodes. So it'd be a really nice one to sit and watch, and not, anyone who has kids, not too painful for us to watch either. So that's a good one for Easter holidays, to keep up your sleeve when they're driving you mad. You can get this out. So yeah, it's called Style It Out. Right, back to reading. So I've got some nice articles, quite a few articles actually from The Guardian. Pearls of Wisdom, the well-being benefits of knitting and crocheting. Now this is not new to us makers, but I found this article quite interesting, talking about how the motion of knitting, obviously, makes you feel a lot happier. The concentration, picking up a project that requires enough concentration to stop your head from whirring, but not too much concentration that you find it exhausting. And they were saying that knitting gets you into something called like a flow state, where you're in a sort of it's like, you know, like a meditative, it's the repetitive movement. It's quite an interesting article, so if you haven't seen this one yet, definitely go and have a look at. I thought it was quite nice. Next up, there's another article from The Guardian about hidden plastics in our clothing and how to avoid them. Now, I know a lot of us make most things, but I know I definitely buy stuff as well. I think it was quite interesting. They talk about basically, you know, how plastics and microplastics are hidden within our clothing, talking about even things down to the trims that you use, you know, like your zips and buttons and stuff, and what to look for if you're shopping. Now, I know a lot of us are kind of much more on it than your average Joe about that sort of thing, but I thought it was quite interesting and definitely worth having a read. Now, this article from Vogue came out in January, and I've only just read it, but I think it's really interesting, and I think it's something we should have a go at as makers. So it said, forget fitness tracking, wardrobe tracking is all the rage in 2024. So they had someone last year who tracked everything that she bought over the entire year, and she put it on a spreadsheet and didn't like acknowledge how many things she was buying. You know, she was not a binge purchaser. She's quite considered in her purchases, and put them down on a list, and got to the end of the year and realised that she'd bought 40 items over the year, and was quite shocked because she didn't think she was a big consumer. And it was really interesting to read it, and she was talking about, you know, considered purchases where she thought long and hard about buying the item, and then how much she'd actually worn it, versus items that she'd bought slightly more on a whim and then not only worn them like a handful of times. So I was thinking this could be a really interesting idea to do with us and making stuff, because I think as makers we fall into that category where the new thing comes out and you make it, and it's almost like, quite often, some people I know, it's the enjoyment of the making almost more than the garment. But I thought this would be a really interesting idea to do with some of our handmade wardrobe, or even projects that we make during the year. How many times we actually wear them? Have they been staples within our wardrobe? So it's a really great article. Have a read of that, and it's definitely food for thought. A really lovely article, another one from The Guardian, with 4 dressmakers talking about their all-time favourite projects, and they vary quite a lot, everything from a wedding dress to a shirt, and they're talking about why they made them, and it's quite a nice little, like, you know, enjoyable read. In each person has a little section with a picture of what they made. Always really love it when a publication has stuff about people making, particularly dressmaking, so it's a nice one to read. Right, so I've got a few things to talk about watching. The first one is a TV show that, if you haven't seen it, most of our team are quite obsessed with it. It's called Sort Your Life Out on BBC iPlayer. It's with Stacey Solomon, and the premise is that they go into people's houses who have let the clutter get out of control. They take everything out of their house. They put everything that they own in their entire house out in a warehouse. So it's all laid out, so you can see everything that you own under one roof, all laid out. And then they ask them to edit it down and sort of help them reorganize their house. Now, the reason I put this one up is that this episode has got a mother who is a maker, and she sews a lot. And they counted her stash of fabric, which is probably, I would say, most people's anxiety-inducing thing to do, to count how many bits of fabric she had. 880 pieces of fabric, just so you know. But yeah, it's a fun watch, but it was really nice because they did her sewing room and sorted it all out for her. I really enjoyed watching that. And if you did enjoy it, then go and binge the rest of the series. It's really nice, easy watching, and yeah, it is definite food for thought on general consumption. Like, when you see everything laid out, it's absolutely wild. And it's that thing also, when you aren't organised, you buy more stuff because you can't find anything. in your stuff. Yeah, so it's a really good one to go and have a watch of. A lovely, this is not a new by any stretch of the imagination. It's an article, it's a video and conversation with Iris Apfel, who's really sadly died last month, and she was such an incredible woman, the most amazing style, and I thought it was really nice. If you haven't seen this, it's an hour long, so you can, and it's her talking about her style. It was filmed quite a while ago, and it's really nice to watch. You could just put it on and have it on in the background. It's almost like a podcast, but then you can see some of the way that she's putting together outfits, and yeah, she's such a lovely, the way she talks is really fantastic. So if you haven't seen it, definitely go and pop it on while you do a bit of sewing. So next up, we've got a really lovely little video. It's about 10 minutes long. It's called Visible Mending, and it has been made, the director actually was awarded a commission from the British, the BFI, to make a short animation, and it's talking about making, and it's really lovely. It's almost like in between a documentary and a piece of art. Like, it's very interestingly shot, and the word, there's someone talking, and then there's this sort of animation that moves through the story of making, and it's definitely worth going and having a watch. I really enjoyed it, and it's won awards, and yeah, it's really, really lovely. So now we move on to podcasts. So first up, I've got Desert Island Discs, which is not new to anyone, but if you haven't listened to it, Sandy Powell, the costume designer, was on a while ago, and if you haven't heard it, it's really great. So she was the costume designer for Shakespeare in Love. She's basically worked with everyone. I mean, she is incredible, but the Shakespeare in Love was her kind of big breakthrough one. She's also did the new Mary Poppins, Gangs of New York. I mean, she's done everything, and I really enjoyed listening to her talk about her career, and yeah, it's a nice one to listen to. So if you haven't heard that one, definitely go and have a listen. Then there is a podcast which was recommended to us. I haven't listened to it yet, but it's on my list, from Haptic and Hue, who I've definitely spoken about a lot, their podcasts. So this one is called Ukraine's Revolutionary Act of Embroidery, How Identity Survives in Stitches, and it's talking about people sewing in Ukraine. It looks like it's going to be a really interesting episode, and it's talking about their kind of fight for resistance. So it's definitely worth having a check out of that one. I will listen to that one over this weekend. That's on my list. Then I've got a lovely, lovely podcast that I've just discovered called the Art of Costume podcast. And if you haven't come across it, it's definitely worth going and having a listen. So each week, the presenters on this podcast break down the costumes from a movie. Just to give you an idea, they've got Succession, The Marvelous Miss Maisel, Barbie. Let's have a look what else we've got. Poor Things, Oppenheimer, Wonka. So there's a really, I mean, there's some older things, but there's also lots of really modern films that have been released recently. It's really great, actually. I've listened to the Barbie one, which was really fun. And it's worth, you know, for us makers, I thought this one would be a good one. So next we've got a podcast which is nothing to do with sewing. It's just one that I am listening to and really enjoying at the moment. It's from the bank called Coutts, and it's called Beyond Success Podcast, and it's interviews with business founders about particular subjects within their business. The thing that I like about it, they're interviewed by Laura Jackson, who is a really great interviewer, and it's kind of a story of what's going on within their business. So if you kind of like business and storytelling, this is quite a good podcast to have a listen to. So there's a few episodes on there. The one that I really enjoyed was Deliciously Ella, the brand, about her kind of struggles through COVID. It was interesting. And then last but not least, another one that is not sewing, but one that I have just found, and it has popped up a couple of times and I've never ended up listening to it, but they had Elizabeth Day on recently, who I absolutely love, and I decided to have a listen to it, and now I've binged loads of them, and it's so wonderful. It's called Dish. It's, I think it's the Waitrose podcast, and it's hosted by Nick Grimshaw and the amazing chef Angela Hartnett. Now, these two people seem like a very odd pairing when I read it. That's why I never listened to it, but they're such a great like double act together. So the concept is that the interviewee picks what they would like to be cooked, and Angela cooks it for them, and then they sit and eat it and they talk about lots of different things. But it's absolutely lovely to listen to. It's a really kind of soft and gentle and fun, so I would highly recommend it if you're feeling like you'd like something kind of light-hearted and a bit funny. Nick Grimshaw and Angela are just such a good mix. They're really funny. They're such different people, but they just work really well together. So that is my last podcast of the week. So I hope that was useful and you found some nice things to kind of keep you busy over the weekend. And yes, have a lovely break, and I'll be back soon with another video. Bye.